I'd like to talk about eating disorders. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Ghazala at the Heart and Soul Cafe. If you've been here before, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're here for the first time, then you're very, very welcome. So eating disorders. There's several eating disorders that I'd like to just quickly run through. And then I'd like to talk about some of the warning signs that you might come across. Where you might think might be telltale signs as to that someone may have an eating disorder. So we'll talk about that as well. So the main one that you've probably, though there's a couple that you've probably all heard of, and that's anorexia nervosa, and that's when someone goes into a complete calorie restriction, cuts down on calories completely, to the extent where it's harmful to the body. They may counteract that with, trying to exercise exercising extensively in order to bring those, to burn up as many calories as possible, and not actually taking that many calories in to begin with, and which then is basically going to result in dramatic weight loss, and not just weight, fat loss, but muscle loss, muscle waste. The person would probably, end up damaging the body quite badly. And then, as we know, we do sadly lose people as a result of anorexia nervosa, sadly. It's a mental health condition. Eating disorders are a mental health condition. I think a lot of the time there's an underlying issue in a person's life where they may feel that they're not really in control of their life. We see it a lot in children. So if children are going through a difficult time, maybe being abused perhaps, or that their parents, let's say, are separated, or they're separating, or they're going through a divorce, we do find that young children may begin to start controlling what they put into their mouth as a result of trying to keep hold of some sort of control in their life. And then sadly what happens, it almost like takes over, because it is a disease. Eating disorders are a disease, and if it's to start off with, if it's something that starts off with that person wanting to take some kind of control back in their life, it could be that they lose control of that and it becomes an eating disorder in itself. Okay, so anorexia. Then there's bulimia nervosa. Bulimia nervosa is when a person usually overeats and then purges, and then actually brings up what they've eaten. They may take laxatives as well, in which case they're basically trying to lose whatever they've actually taken in. Again, there's other complications with the esophagus, being ruptured perhaps, or damaged in some way due to purging, bringing up food again and again. Again, it's possibly a way of somebody trying to control their life. It could be that they're turning to food for comfort, but then feel guilty about the amount of food that they've eaten, and then they try to expel that food as quickly as possible. What else is there? There's so anorexia, bulimia, binge eating. Again, that might be due to some other underlying problem that's going on in somebody's life, where they feel that they're sort of trying to get some kind of comfort or some kind of it's usually comfort initially, but I mean in the long run it's very much that a person is going to feel probably guilty, with the amount of food they've eaten, so that could lead to just feeling sort of like self-disgust, if you like, and that might again lead to overeating and binging again, sort of the next time. So yeah, there's that. There's emotional overeating as well. Again, these can sort of overlap. One could sort of lead to the other, so they can overlap somewhat. There's OSFED, which is other specific feeding and eating disorders. These can be equally as debilitating as bulimia nervosa and anorexia nervosa, but they don't actually fit into those categories. But there is plenty, actually, other specific feeding and eating disorders. So that's SFED. Okay, and then there's ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and this is when somebody avoids eating a particular type of food, a particular coloured food, a particular textured food. So it could be, for example, all green coloured food is, not something that they're going to avoid, or certain textured food. We do see it a lot more in children with autism, where they maybe don't want to eat any kind of coloured food. That's all sort of quite beige coloured food. Okay, and that's where they feel sort of safe. So there's that as well. And then there's pica. Some people do pronounce it pica, I think, but pica is PICA. And this is really when somebody eats things that have no nutritional value at all. So it could be paper, card, chalk, coal, soil. It could be sort of things like that. I sometimes say McDonald's. I'm just joking, but it could be anything that has no nutritional value at all. Personally, I mean, this isn't something that I've read, but personally, I do believe maybe it could be it's a mineral deficiency, possibly. So the body is trying to get that mineral from somewhere. You find pregnant women who, have a craving for a certain kind of thing, and not eating coal, perhaps. And so that's where I sort of start thinking, is it a mineral deficiency which is causing that person to want to eat something to try and, recoup that mineral they may be low on, perhaps. So that might be one thing. So there's quite a lot of eating disorders out there. And warning signs may be that, someone has a dramatic sort of weight loss or possibly weight gain, just something that's, just doesn't seem quite, normal in its normal sense, if you like. They could, be quite secretive about, especially when it comes to anorexia nervosa, people can be quite secretive about their food, and they could sort of be lying about, they've had a meal. If you ask them, have you already had breakfast? Oh yeah, I've already had breakfast. I've already had lunch. So that it could be something that they just, that they do lie about. If somebody is, somebody has bulimia, they may rush off to the loo, soon after eating. That might be a telltale sign. They might come back looking quite flushed, looking red. Eyes may be red, where they may have purged. So, there's little telltale signs there, perhaps. Others are that, someone really eats very, very slowly, and maybe is, passing that food around, pushing the food around the table or on their plate. Hopefully they're eating on a plate, they're not eating off the table, but they might be, sort of pushing it around that plate, and sort of avoiding, or cutting their food up into tiny, tiny pieces and eating it very slowly, making it look as if they're sort of eating a meal along with everyone. They possibly don't want to eat in public, so they wouldn't want to go out for a meal with you. They would probably avoid that, because then, obviously others are going to notice their eating habits. So there is quite a few telltale signs, isn't there? And the others are obviously, depression. It could be depression and, withdrawal, that they're sort of spending a lot of time on their own and not really socializing, not interacting with others. So those could be other telltale signs. So what do you do? Well, it's quite tricky, isn't it? When it comes to food and body image and weight, it's really, really quite sensitive. It is a sensitive subject. So if I suspected that somebody, a friend or a colleague or a loved one, was if I sort of suspected that they maybe are, might have an eating disorder and maybe they're developing one perhaps, I would not address that. I wouldn't question it. I wouldn't say, oh, you've lost lots of weight, or you've put on lots of weight, or, well, you probably wouldn't say that anyway, because there's certain things that are societal norms, aren't they? We're quite good at saying, oh, you've lost weight, but we're not that good at saying, we don't usually say, oh, you've put on lots of weight in that way. And as if, losing weight is a positive and putting on weight is a negative. And it's not always like that. Sometimes people, need to put on weight. Sometimes people, have lost weight due to, the fact that they've been ill, and it might not have been, intentional. So we don't really want to just assume and jump to conclusions and just assume things about people. So I think we want to be careful about that. It's that thing, isn't it, where someone thinks that someone else is pregnant and say, oh, when's it due? And they might not be pregnant at all. So we need to be really careful. We don't want to just assume things about people. I don't think, that's a good thing to do. So I would not say anything about the fact that I've noticed some kind of odd sort of eating behavior around, or just a relationship around food about somebody. What I would say is, I've noticed that you don't seem quite like yourself lately. You seem a little bit, low. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Is there anything that you'd like to share? I'm a really good listener. I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I do care. And if that person was to say, oh, why are you asking me that? Of course everything's okay. Don't be so silly. Well, then I would leave the door open. I would say, well, you know where to find me, don't you? You've got my number. You know where I am. If you need to talk, I'm here. The door's always open for you. And I would leave it that way. I wouldn't sort of shut that door and tick that box that I've asked that person. So I would leave it that way. But it is a sensitive subject, and it is difficult, and it's worrying if you, especially when it's somebody that you love. Often an eating disorder can also almost be like another person, like the second person, and that person who's maybe got that condition may even give that condition a name, and I've seen that as well, because it almost like takes over. It can make you behave in certain ways, like fall out with people that care about you. So it might be your parents that are worried about you. So that inner voice, the actual condition, is telling you to, they don't know what they're talking about. You want to keep out of their way and not interact with them, because they don't know what the fact that this is making you feel better. And so you'll have that inner voice perhaps going on there. But the best way would be to not go straight in with, I've noticed that you eat this way. I've noticed that you're not eating and you're lying about, or there's food wrappers, hidden in the bin, that kind of thing, or there's food stashed away in a drawer, underneath a drawer, underneath the bed perhaps. So, you don't really want to sort of, approach the person that way and embarrass them, or, because that way they're probably going to put up their guard and sort of think, well, I'm not going to talk about this at all, because it'd be the wrong way to approach someone if you're sort of just accusing someone of something. It's probably best to just say, I'm here if you need to talk. If there's anything that you need to talk about, if there's anything that's troubling you, I'm here. And hopefully there will come a time when that person does realize that, well, yeah, I probably need to admit it, to myself and to somebody else, that, and hopefully maybe get some help. Okay. It is a difficult subject, but it's one that I feel that we need to address it, talk about it more, because, when I talk about self-harm, and I think eating disorders can be seen as a way of self-harming, but it also can be that the person is just started off, as I say, wanting some control in their life, or wanting some comfort in their life, or, And then that becomes almost like their friend, first of all, and it's sort of like their secret and their thing that they have. And then it can obviously get out of control, perhaps sometimes. So yeah, it's but it is something that we need to talk about more, so that we can raise awareness around it. So when it comes to others, we know what to what to look out for, and we know some of the names of certain eating disorders and more or less what they are. Okay. I hope you found, and then let's say, just before I finish, actually, if somebody does need help, well, there is help out there. There is, you can go to the doctor. You can say, I'll come along to the doctor with you. There's a really good website. It's called beateatingdisorders.org.uk, and that has a lot of information about eating disorders in there. So it's beateatingdisorders.org.uk. You can sort of check that out as well. And again, there's self-help. There's helplines where you can reach out for help, and there's charities out there as well. So it just needs you to sort of have a look and see what there is, see what there is locally, see what there is. Sometimes it's counselling, sometimes it's CBT, EMDR. So there's lots of therapies and treatments out there. It just means for you to first admit it to yourself, I suppose, and then admit it to somebody who you know that you can trust, who cares, and then take it forward from there. Okay. Thank you for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please do like, subscribe, please do comment, please do share. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed. It means so much to me, but we need lots more before we build this, this community that I would really like to do. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, look after your hearts and souls. Thank you.